was tired of killing. For 32 years, he had been the best sniper in the United Earth Defense Force. His hands had ended more lives than he could count. His eyes had watched through rifle scopes as enemies fell on distant worlds. Now, at 61 years old, he wanted nothing more than silence and peace. The war was over. Earth had won its place among the stars. Humanity had proven itself to the galaxy, and had finally retired with enough credits to buy himself a quiet corner of the universe. That was how he found himself standing in a crowded auction hall on Station Meridian 7, surrounded by aliens of every shape and size. The station floated at the edge of known space, a meeting point for traders, criminals, and those who wanted to disappear. Fit right in. The auctioneer was a named Bora. She had 4 arms and skin the color of dark copper. Her voice echoed through the hall as she listed property after property. Moons, asteroids, abandoned stations, the forgotten places of the galaxy sold to the highest bidder. Had his eye on a small moon in the system. Good soil, clean water, far from anyone who might recognize his face or remember his reputation. He could build a farm there, grow vegetables, watch the stars at night and pretend he had never held a rifle. But then Bora announced Lot 1147. A research facility on 3, she said. Her voice carried a strange note, almost like relief. Formerly owned by the Hollow civilization, abandoned for over 300 years. Starting bid, 5,000 credits. The hall went quiet. Looked around. Nobody was bidding. The aliens near him were actually stepping back as if the lot itself was dangerous. He saw fear in their eyes, real fear. "What is wrong with this place?" he asked the creature beside him, a small furry being with too many eyes. The creature shivered. "The Hollow are gone, all of them. One night their entire civilization vanished. Nobody knows why. Nobody wants to know. Their buildings are cursed." Looked at the holographic image floating above the auctioneer's platform. The facility was large and black, rising from a frozen landscape like a broken tooth. No windows, no decorations, just cold, dark metal against white ice. It was ugly, it was probably worthless. But it was quiet. 10,000 credits, said. Every head in the hall turned toward him. Bora stared at him with all 6 of her eyes. The furry creature beside him actually ran away. "Sold," Bora said quickly, as if she was afraid he might change his mind. To the human. After the auction, Bora found him in the payment office. She processed his credits with hands that moved too fast, like she wanted to finish the transaction before something went wrong. "You humans," she muttered, "always buying what others fear to touch." Shrugged, "I like quiet places." "That facility is more than quiet, it is dead. The Hollow left nothing behind, nothing useful anyway, just empty rooms and sealed doors." She paused and looked at him with something almost like concern. Why would a human want such a place? Thought about the question. He thought about 32 years of war, about the friends he had lost, about the things he had done that still woke him up at night. "Because I am tired," he said simply, "and the dead do not ask questions." 1 week later, arrived on 3. He was not alone. Sora sat beside him in the small transport ship, checking her medical equipment for the 100th time. She was 34 years old, with short black hair and steady hands. She had been a combat medic under his command for 8 years. When he retired, she had followed him. "You do not have to come with me," he had told her before they left. "I have nowhere else to go," she had answered. "And someone needs to keep you alive, old man." Now they looked through the transport's window at the facility below. It was even uglier in person. Black walls rose from the ice like cliffs. The frozen ground around it was perfectly flat, as if nothing had grown there for centuries. "It looks like a tomb," Sora said. "Good," replied. "Tombs are quiet." They landed near what looked like the main entrance, but the door was buried under centuries of frost and ice. His mechanical left arm whirred as he cleared the debris away. The arm was a replacement for the one he had lost on 9 during a battle that had killed everyone else in his squad. It was stronger than his original arm had ever been, but it never felt warm. When the ice was cleared, pressed his hand against the door. For a long moment nothing happened. Then, with a sound like a sigh, the door slid open. Inside, the lights flickered on automatically. One by one, they lit a long corridor that stretched into darkness. The walls were smooth and gray. The air was stale but breathable. Everything was covered in a thin layer of dust. Sora stepped inside first, her scanner raised. No life signs, no radiation, no toxins. She looked back at it. Really is empty. Walked past her, his boots leaving prints in the dust. His rifle hung across his back out of habit. He knew he probably would not need it, but after 32 years, the weight of it felt more natural than its absence. The corridor split into multiple paths. Doorways led to rooms they could not see. Somewhere deep in the facility, something hummed with power. "The Hollow have been gone for 300 years," said quietly, "but their lights still work, their doors still open." He looked at Sora. What were they hiding here? Sora had no answer. For 3 weeks, and Sora explored the upper levels of the facility. They found laboratories filled with equipment they did not understand. Strange machines with no buttons or screens. Glass containers holding crystals that hummed when touched. Metal tools shaped for hands that had too many fingers. They found living quarters where the beds were too long and too narrow for any species they knew. The pillows were made of something like stone. The blankets felt like water frozen solid. They found storage rooms containing thousands of small boxes. Each box held a different sample. Soil from worlds they had never heard of. Water from oceans that no longer existed. Seeds from plants that had died millions of years ago. Sora documented everything with her scanner. She took pictures. She made notes. She tried to understand what the Hollow had been doing in this place. Mostly walked. He moved through the corridors like a ghost, his rifle on his back, listening to the silence. The facility was enormous. Every day they found new rooms, new corridors, new mysteries, but they found no answers. On the 24th day, they found the elevator. It was hidden behind a wall that looked solid until leaned against it. The wall slid away, revealing a small chamber with a single control panel. The panel had only 2 buttons. One pointed up, one pointed down. Sora looked at, "We have explored every level above us. There is nothing left." Nodded, his finger pressed the button pointing down. The elevator descended for exactly 7 minutes. Sora counted each second on her watch. When it finally stopped, the doors opened onto a corridor unlike anything they had seen before. The walls glowed with soft blue light. Bioluminescent strips were embedded in the surface, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. The air was warmer here, almost comfortable, but it smelled wrong, like copper and burned ozone, like blood and lightning mixed together. They walked slowly. Their footsteps echoed in the silence. At the end of the corridor, a massive door blocked their path. Symbols were carved into its surface. Did not recognize the language, but his translation implant caught fragments of meaning. Observation, archive, do not forget. "This is it," Sora whispered. "This is what they were hiding." Pressed his hand against the door. It opened immediately, as if it had been waiting for exactly this moment. The room behind it was the size of a city. Stepped inside and stopped breathing. Sora made a sound that was not quite a scream. The room stretched in every direction, so large that the far walls disappeared into shadow, and filling every inch of that space were tubes. Transparent cylinders, each one taller than a man, arranged in perfect rows that went on forever. Inside each tube was a body. Not dead, sleeping. Walked forward in a daze. He passed tube after tube, looking at the faces inside. Some he recognized, with their 4 arms and copper skin, with their armored bodies and massive jaws, Veen with their thin limbs and huge dark eyes. But there were also species he had never seen, creatures that existed in no galactic database, beings that must have been extinct for thousands of years. And then he saw the humans. Row after row of them. Men, women, children. Some wore clothes that looked ancient. Others wore nothing at all. Their faces were peaceful. Their chests rose and fell with slow, shallow breaths. Sora ran to one of the tubes. Inside was a young woman with black hair and Korean features. She could not have been older than 20. Her eyes were closed. Her skin was pale, but she was alive. "She looks like she could be my sister," Sora whispered, her hand pressed against the glass. "How long has she been here?" Counted the tubes. Thousands, tens of thousands, maybe millions, more than he could comprehend. At the center of the room stood a console. It was simple compared to the rest of the technology, just a flat surface with a single glowing symbol. Touched it. A hologram appeared above the console. It showed a figure that must have been one of the Hollow, tall and thin, with skin like gray silk and eyes that held no pupils. It spoke in a language that's implants struggled to translate. The words came slowly, broken and incomplete. "We have watched, we have collected. When they come, only the archive will remain." The hologram flickered. The Hollow's voice grew quieter, almost sad. "Do not forget what was. Do not forget what we preserved. The galaxy will burn, everything will end, but the archive will endure." Another flicker. The image was failing. 300 years of waiting had damaged the recording. "The sleepers must not wake, not until the fire passes, not until it is safe." The hologram died. The room was silent except for the soft hum of the tubes keeping their prisoners alive. Sora looked at her face was pale, her hands were shaking. "Who is coming?" she asked. "What fire, what did they mean?" Stared at the tubes, at the humans who had been taken from Earth centuries ago, at the species that were supposed to be dead, at the millions of lives preserved in this frozen tomb while the galaxy continued without them. The Hollow had seen something, something so terrible that they had built this place to survive it. They had collected samples from every civilization they could find. They had preserved the best and of 100 species. And then they had vanished, erased from existence overnight, leaving only this archive behind. "I do not know," said slowly. His hand touched the tube nearest to him. Inside, a human child slept peacefully, unaware of the centuries passing around her. "But we are going to find out." He looked at Sora. His eyes were hard, the eyes of a sniper, the eyes of a man who had spent his life finding answers that others wanted to stay hidden. "Get me everything you can find, every record, every file, every piece of data in this facility." He turned back to the endless rows of sleeping bodies. "Someone owes these people an explanation, and I intend to get it." Spent the next 6 months studying the archive. He slept only 4 hours each night. He ate only when Sora forced him to. The rest of his time was spent reading the Hollow's records, watching their videos, and trying to understand the truth they had hidden on this frozen moon. The language was difficult. The Hollow had thought differently than humans. Their words carried meanings that his translation implant could not fully capture. But slowly, piece by piece, the picture became clear. And it was worse than anything he had imagined. He could not do it alone, so he sent encrypted messages to old contacts, people who owed him favors, people who could keep secrets. The first to arrive she was an intelligence officer who had worked with human forces during the border wars, had saved her life on a burning station 15 years ago. She still walked with a limp from the injuries she had suffered that day. The second was Park. She was a human scientist who specialized in. She studied dead civilizations for a living. She had published papers about the Hollow before anyone knew this facility existed. Together, the 4 of them worked in the archive, decoded military files, analyzed cultural records, Sora mapped the biological data and read everything they translated, searching for the answer to one question. What had destroyed the hollow? He found it in a file marked with the same symbol as the door. Observation, archive, do not forget. The file was a history, not of the hollow but of the galaxy itself, a history spanning 50,000 years. The hollow had been observers. They traveled between stars, watching civilizations rise and fall. They documented everything they found: languages, art, technology, biology. They collected samples from every species they encountered. But they were not collectors for pleasure. They were collectors out of desperation. Because every 10,000 years, something came. The hollow called it the silence. It moved through the galaxy like a wave, like a fire, like a wind that erased everything it touched. It did not invade planets, it consumed them. It did not kill civilizations, it unmade them. When the silence passed through a system, nothing remained. No bodies, no ruins, no memories, just empty space where life had once existed. The hollow had survived 3 cycles of the silence. Each time, they had hidden. They buried themselves in the deepest places they could find. They turned off their lights and their signals and their thoughts. They waited in the darkness until the silence passed. But hiding was not a solution. It was only a delay. So they built the archives, facilities scattered across the galaxy, hidden on moons and asteroids that nobody would ever find. Inside each archive, they preserved samples of every civilization they had encountered, seeds in case the garden was burned. And 300 years ago, the silence had come again. This time, the hollow were found. The records ended there, but the message was clear. The entire hollow civilization had been erased in a single night. Only the archives remained, waiting in the darkness for someone to find them. Looked up from her console. Her face was pale, her hands trembled. "The cycle," she said. "According to their calculations, the next cycle was supposed to begin." She checked the numbers again, hoping she was wrong. "Now, within the next few years." Pulled up reports from across the galaxy. Her 4 hands moved quickly across multiple screens. "There have been anomalies," she said. "Colony worlds in the outer systems have gone dark. Ships have disappeared without sending distress signals. The Galactic Council has been hiding the information. They say it is just communication failures, equipment problems." She looked at. "They are lying. Something is already happening." Stood before the tubes, looking at the sleeping humans. A man from ancient Earth. A woman who might have been a queen. A child who would never grow up. "The hollow preserved them because they knew they could not be saved any other way," he said slowly. "These are not prisoners. They are seeds, the last hope for species that were supposed to die." Sora pointed to one of the data files. It showed a comparison chart. Hundreds of species listed side by side, with notes about their strengths and weaknesses. Humans were highlighted with special annotations. "Remarkable adaptability," Sora read aloud. "Persistence beyond logical thresholds. Pattern recognition under extreme stress." She looked at. "They were studying us specifically." Found another file. It was older than the others, more damaged, but the fragments were clear enough. Human specimen recovered from Sol 3 during Cycle 7 observation. Specimen displayed anomalous resilience. Terminated 3 silent scouts before capture. He kept reading. His blood ran cold. "Recommend further study. Recommend priority preservation. Humanity may represent the variable." Laughed, but there was no humor in it. "They think humans can fight the thing that destroys galaxies." Remembered 32 years of war. He remembered fighting when fighting made no sense. He remembered surviving when survival was impossible. He remembered the look in his enemies' eyes when they realized that killing him would not be easy. Humans did not know when to quit. It was their greatest flaw. It was also their greatest strength. "Maybe," he said. He turned to face his team. "Maybe that is exactly what we do." The facility hummed around them. The sleepers dreamed their ancient dreams, and somewhere in the darkness between stars, the silence was already moving. Time was running out. Word spread despite their precautions. Someone talked, maybe a trader on station Meridian 7, maybe a signal that escaped their encryption. It did not matter how. What mattered was that the Galactic Council now knew about the archive. They sent investigators, a team of 12 officials from 6 different species. They arrived on 3 with legal documents and weapons and the authority of the entire galactic government behind them. They demanded access to the facility. They demanded control of the sleepers. They demanded that surrender everything he had found. Said no. The lead investigator, a tall with armor, stepped forward. You do not understand, human. This facility is too important to be left in private hands. The council will take possession of it. You can cooperate or you can be removed. He looked at the soldiers behind him. He counted their weapons. He measured the distance between them. Old habits never died. The council has been hiding the truth for months, said calmly. Colonies are disappearing. Ships are going dark. And you have done nothing. You are not here to protect these sleepers. You are here to control them or destroy them. The reached for his weapon. He never touched it. Moved faster than a 61-year-old man should be able to move. His mechanical arm grabbed this wrist. His other hand pulled a knife from his belt. In 3 seconds, 4 investigators were on the ground. They were not dead. He was tired of killing, but they would not be moving for a long time. The remaining investigators ran. Watch them flee. They will come back with an army. I know, said. He looked at the blood on his hands. But we needed time, and now we have it. The silence was moving faster than the Hollow had predicted. Reports came from across the galaxy. 12 colony worlds had gone completely dark. Communication relays in 3 sectors had stopped transmitting. Ships that went to investigate never returned. The council was paralyzed. Half wanted to fight, half wanted to hide. None of them could agree on what to do. Made his decision alone. He began waking the sleepers. It was dangerous work. Each tube had to be carefully opened. Each body had to be slowly warmed. Created a medical protocol based on the Hollow's records. Sara implemented it with steady hands. Some sleepers did not survive. Their bodies were too old. Their systems too damaged by centuries of artificial sleep, buried them in the ice outside the facility. He memorized each face. He promised himself their deaths would mean something. But most survived. The first human woke personally was a man named Han. According to the Hollow's records, had been taken from Earth in 1592 during a great war. He had been a soldier, a warrior. He had killed 11 Hollow observers with nothing but a sword before they finally subdued him. The tube opened with a hiss. Cold air rushed out. Eyes fluttered, then opened. He saw his face above him. He saw the strange room around him. He saw the future he had never expected to reach. His first words were, "Are you with them?" No, said, "I am human like you." Sat up slowly. His muscles were weak from centuries of sleep, but his eyes were sharp, the eyes of a survivor. Where am I? A moon called 3. You have been asleep for over 400 years. Was silent for a long moment. Could see him processing the information, accepting it, moving past the shock faster than should have been possible. My family, finally asked. Gone, everything you knew is gone. I am sorry. Another silence. Looked at his hands. They were the same hands that had held a sword 4 centuries ago, the same hands that had killed to protect his home. Why did you wake me? Told him everything. The Hollow, the archive, the silence, the coming destruction that nobody else was prepared to face. Listened without interrupting. When finished, the ancient warrior looked at him with eyes that had seen war long before was born. Give me a weapon, said. Show me the enemy. Over the next year, woke 7,000 humans. Soldiers from every era of Earth's history. Warriors who had fought with swords and spears and rifles and things had no name for. Men and women who had been taken by the Hollow specifically because they refused to die. He also woke thousands of other species. The massive and armored, who had once been the galaxy's greatest warriors. They had been declared extinct 200 years ago. Now they walked the corridors of the archive, testing their strength, preparing for a battle they had been stolen from. The Veen, thin and ethereal, whose psychic abilities had been unmatched. They could feel the silence approaching. They could sense its hunger, and they were not afraid. Species that had fought the silence before and almost won. Species that had never surrendered, even when surrender was the only logical choice. An army of the preserved, the forgotten, the supposed to be dead. And at their head stood a retired sniper who had only wanted silence. Sara found him one night, standing in the archive, looking at the remaining tubes. "Millions still sleep," she said. "We cannot wake them all." "I know," touched one of the tubes. Inside, a child dreamed of a world that no longer existed. "But we wake who we can, we fight with what we have. And if it is not enough." Turned to face her. His mechanical arm hummed softly. His eyes held the calm certainty of a man who had made his peace with death long ago. "Then we make it enough," he said. "That is what humans do." Outside the facility, the stars continued their eternal dance. But in the darkness between them, something was moving, something hungry, something old. The silence was coming. The silence came on a Tuesday. It began in the outer rim, a wave of absolute darkness that moved between the stars like a living thing. Planets stopped transmitting. Ships stopped flying. Stars themselves seemed to dim as the silence passed through them. The Galactic Council called for evacuation. Billions of beings fled toward the core worlds, hoping that safety existed in numbers. They packed onto ships. They crowded into stations. They prayed to gods they had forgotten. They were wrong to hope. The silence did not care about numbers. It consumed everything equally. The rich and the poor, the strong and the weak, the brave and the afraid. But was not afraid. He led his army out of the archive and into the void. 40,000 warriors from across time and space. Humans who had fought in wars that history had forgotten. Who had waited 3 centuries for another battle. Veen who could feel the enemy's approach like a cold wind on their minds. They were not enough. They knew they were not enough. They went anyway. The first battle happened near a gas giant called Threshold 9. The silence appeared as shapes that existed between darkness and form. Things that moved in ways that made no sense. Things that occupied spaces that should not have been able to hold them. Ships that faced the silence directly went mad. Crews turned on each other. Pilots flew into stars. The psychic pressure of the entity broke minds like glass. But's forces were different. Han led a boarding party onto an infected station. The silence had taken the crew. Their bodies still moved, but their eyes were empty. Their mouths spoke words in languages that had never existed. Squads started dying. The psychic pressure was too strong. One by one they fell to their knees, screaming at visions only they could see. But kept fighting. When his gun ran out of ammunition, he used a blade. When the blade broke, he used his hands. When his hands were broken, he used his teeth. He killed 17 infected bodies before the pressure finally began to crack his mind. And then something strange happened. The silence hesitated. For the first time in 50,000 years, the entity that had consumed civilizations encountered something it did not understand. Was dying. He knew he was dying. His body was broken. His mind was fracturing. But he was still fighting. Not because he thought he could win. He knew he could not win. He fought because fighting was all he knew how to do, because surrender was a word in a language he had never learned. The silence pulled back from the station, just a little, just for a moment. But a moment was enough. Sora analyzed the data from every battle. She studied the patterns. She looked for the weakness that the Hollow had never found. And she found it. The silence feeds on logic, she explained to the fleet commanders. It consumes rational minds. It overwhelms beings by showing them the mathematical certainty of their destruction. Every species it has ever encountered operated on survival instincts, self-preservation, logical fear. She pulled up data on human brain chemistry, human psychology, human history. But humans do not always operate on logic. We fight when fighting is pointless. We hope when hope is gone. We get angry, and sometimes that anger matters more than survival. Nodded, he understood now. He understood why the Hollow had studied humans so carefully, why they had marked humanity as the variable. The silence could not model irrationality. It could not predict stupidity. It could not consume what it did not understand. He transmitted a message to every remaining ship in the galaxy. Stop running, stop being afraid, start getting angry. The war lasted 7 years. Billions died. Entire systems were lost. The silence consumed world after world, fleet after fleet. Sometimes the darkness seemed endless. Sometimes hope itself seemed foolish. But humanity led the charge in every major battle, not because they were stronger or smarter or more advanced, but because they simply refused to accept defeat. The learned to fight with human fury. The Veen learned to project human chaos instead of human calm. Species that had hidden from the silence learned to stand and rage. The final battle happened at the galaxy's core. A fleet of 10,000 ships faced the heart of the silence itself, an entity that had devoured more civilizations than anyone could count. Commanded from his ship's bridge, he was 73 years old now, more machine than man. His mechanical arm had been upgraded a dozen times. His eyes had been replaced with sensors. His heart was kept beating by technology he did not understand. But his mind was still human, still stubborn, still angry. Around him stood the survivors, Sora, gray-haired but steady, who had learned to fly starships with the same determination he had once applied to swords, who had finally understood the enemy's weakness. It has never had to die, said. It does not know how, we need to teach it. The fleet attacked. Ships fell by the hundreds, but more kept coming. When weapons failed, they rammed. When engines died, they detonated their cores. Ship went down in the first hour, but not before he drove it directly into the silence's heart, screaming a battle cry in a language no one had spoken for centuries. The silence began to fracture. Not because it was overwhelmed, but because it was experiencing something new, loss, fear, the understanding that it might not survive. In the end flew the final ship himself. Everyone else was gone. His mechanical arm had failed. His vision was fading, but he could see the silence ahead of him, a wound in reality, finally vulnerable. He thought about the quiet he had wanted, the farm he had never built, the peace he had never found. Then he pushed the throttle forward. The explosion was visible from 1,000 light-years away. The silence did not die, but it retreated, wounded, diminished, confused by an enemy that had refused to follow the rules of the universe. The survivors rebuilt. The archive became a memorial. The sleepers who remained were woken into a galaxy that was but still alive. Han became an admiral in the new Galactic Defense Force. He trained soldiers from 100 species in the art of stubborn defiance. Sora took over the archive. She prepared for the day the silence might return. They built a statue of at the galaxy's core, a retired sniper with a mechanical arm, standing over a wound in space that still had not fully healed. The inscription read, "He only wanted silence, he gave us a future instead." And somewhere in the depths between stars, the silence waited and remembered. For the first time in its eternal existence, it knew something like fear. It had learned about humanity. It would never forget. And for the first time in 10,000 years, something would be waiting for it. But for the first time in his life, felt something other than tiredness. He felt purpose. The facility hummed around them. The lights pulsed gently, and somewhere in the depths of space, something old and terrible continued its endless journey through the stars. The clock was already ticking. They just did not know it yet. They walked deeper into the darkness. Behind them, the entrance door slowly closed. The facility had been waiting for 3 centuries. Now finally, someone had come.